All right, all you bros and bras, so check it out. In the last video, what we did is we built the system to listen for incoming payments, and we called those deposits. And check this out, our bot is getting so many deposits in right now. I mean, things are looking good. Now, before we can actually process the transaction, like increase their balance or sell them whatever digital item that our Discord bot is trying to sell them, we need to first confirm their payment. So that is what we're going to be doing in this video, taking these deposits, and let me plop that open one more time and saying, okay, these are all the deposits that we received, and by default, we're going to flag those as it is confirmed false and 0 confirmation checks. So for any of these deposits that are not yet confirmed and have less than 20 checks, that means that we need to take those and query the blockchain again to look for confirmations. All right, simple enough. So let's go ahead and get started. So we already made this placeholder function a couple tutorials ago called check confirmations. So right above this check deposits function that I collapsed, we can just make another one called check confirmations. And then what is this going to do? So we can say we can query unconfirmed from Mongo, and I'll say from database, just in case you want to swap out Mongo for another database later on. And then whenever we have unconfirmed deposits, what we need to do is we need to check the bank for a confirmation status on those. So check bank for status. All right. So the first step, of course, is to query unconfirmed deposits from our Mongo database. So from these deposits right here, what we can do, actually, let me set this equal to a variable. So I'll say unconfirmed deposits is equal to the deposits collection, and we want to find, which ones do we want to find? Well, the first thing that we want to do, and let me pull open my deposits object. We want to make sure that the confirmation checks is less than what we have for settings, because remember, we let the Discord bot developer set this. So we'll say first, make sure that you are only looking at the unconfirmed deposits, and the syntax for Mongo is a little bit goofy like this, but in order to say less than maximum confirmation checks, first you need to actually import this, which I don't think I did already. All right. So the syntax for this is you need to make a nested object and you do $LT. That means less than. And then for the value, you just write maximum confirmation checks, which is in our case 20. So either way, query from this deposits collection all of the deposits that have less than 20 confirmation checks. What I want to do is also run this query for unconfirmed deposits, where is confirmed is equal to none. Okay, so this is going to query all of the deposits that we received, but we have not checked the confirmation status on those yet. So for those, what we can do is, well, we got to go ahead and check it. So for deposits in unconfirmed deposits, and the first thing we want to do is get the block ID, because remember, in our deposit object, we store the block ID, and pulling my diagram open one more time. So these deposits, you can just think of those like bank transactions. Now, these bank transactions, what we need to do is we need to get the related block, and then we need to see if there's a confirmation for that block. So how do we do that in the network API? Well, there is an endpoint on the bank called confirmation blocks. And what you can do is you can pass in a block filter. And then if it has results, for example, let me pass in this one. I don't know what block this is, but I'll kind of show you guys the example. So in this, we can say if block is equal to this ID, then it's going to come back and it says, yes, it has one confirmation on it. So that's basically what we're going to do with the blocks related to our deposits using this confirmation blocks endpoint to see if they have any confirmations. Okay, sounds good, sounds good. So now let's get to the meat and potatoes of this. So the first thing we need to do on deposit is pull off the block ID. So we'll say the block ID is equal to deposit, and just to make sure we get the right key, that is equal to the deposit's block ID. Now after this, we are essentially going to generate this URL. So let me just go ahead and copy that. All right, so I'll say the URL is equal to, and let me make this a F string. And okay, so this was a random block that we had, but of course we want to replace that with a block ID. Now, before I do that, just want to make sure that we have the bank protocol and the bank IP. And of course, we're going to be looking for confirmation blocks. For what block? Well, not this random one. We want to look for the block matching our block ID for the now unconfirmed deposit. So after this, we're going to be making a request, getting back some results, and then we're going to say if on this result set, the count is greater or equal to 1. And let me just make I'll just make a random block ID to show you guys this. Okay, so if no confirmation blocks exist, then it's going to come back with something looking like this. However, if there are confirmations, then we can look at this count property and pretty much just test the Boolean value of this. So that's the logic that we're going to be using. And all right, so let's go ahead and try to first fetch that data from the database. And we are going to put this because if there are no confirmation blocks, then we may get the error. So we're just going to wrap this entire thing in a try except block. So for the URL, this is of course going to be equal to the URL we just generated, and we just need to pass in headers, but we don't have anything special to add, so empty object. So after this, what we need to do is we need to get this count object. So for we can just say this is equal to the number of confirmations, and that is equal to data count. All right, looking beautiful. And then we can just say here, before I do this, this is kind of annoying me, where we can handle all exceptions and just pass. Because if there are any exceptions, which means that there aren't any confirmations yet, then we don't want to like break out of the loop or stop checking for any other deposits that we need to check for. We just need to say, okay, we acknowledge that there aren't any confirmations. Let's just move on to the next unconfirmed deposit and check that one. Okay, so I just wanted to throw that because, I don't know, it feels weird right in a try block without any except. But anyways, popping back up here, okay, we're going to say if there are confirmations, then what this means is that we now have a newly confirmed deposit. We can now go through and, increment the user's balance or process registration, whatever we want to do. But for now, I'm just going to write pass, and let's say something like this. We'll make a function later on that is like handle deposit confirmation. And okay, so this is the main logic. However, there is one other thing that I want to do, and that is no matter if you did indeed find that, yes, this deposit is now confirmed, or whether you ran this check and you say this deposit is not confirmed, or in other words, we don't know if it's confirmed yet. Either way, what we want to do is we want to increment this value right here, which is confirmation checks. Because remember, we only want to check these a maximum of 20 times. So how do we do that? Well, we can code it right there, but let's actually break this out just so we keep our code nice and clean. And we will say, create a new function called let me make sure. Increment confirmation checks. And for this, we are just going to pass in the entire deposit object. And then we can say something like increment the number of All right, increment the number of confirmation checks for the given deposit. So this is going to be a nice, easy query. What we do in our deposits collection is we're just going to update one. And then the first argument this takes is the filter of what you want to update. And we just want to update the deposit that we passed in. So we'll say the ID is equal to the deposits ID. All right, so this is just going to return a query of one object. And then after this, to increment that value of confirmation checks, remember this is kind of that weird syntax, but we use $INC, that means increment. And now we have to give it a value that we want to increment and also the quantity that we want to increment it by. And just to make sure that I don't have any typos or anything, we say we want to increment the amount of confirmation checks by how many? By 1. Okay, so now that we got this function that pretty much takes a deposit, and all it is going to do, if I pull open Mongo, it's going to take this value of confirmation checks, and whenever we call this function, it's just going to increment it by 1. So 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Simple enough. And when do you want to call this? Let me make sure I'm in the right place. Okay, so for each deposit, we want to call it on this regardless if we found that it does have a confirmation or it doesn't have a confirmation yet. So increment confirmation checks, deposit equal the deposit, and there you go. So I now believe we have two more functions to write. The first one is handle deposit confirmation. So this is a function that is essentially going to say whenever you do have a confirmation for this deposit, then what we are going to do on this deposit is flag this unconfirmed from false to true. And then we'll also have it handle that other logic to say, if this user already exists, then update their balance. If not, we need to account for the fact that they may be trying to go through the registration process. So that's what we're going to be doing right here. So either way, let me make sure. Okay. So we'll say def handle deposit confirmation. And this is going to take a deposit. Okay, so first thing it's going to do is update confirmation, and we'll say increase users balance or create a new user if they exist. All right, so whenever we get a deposit from a user, take a note of this. So right now we don't have any users added because no one registered yet. And remember, only when we can verify your registration that that account number does indeed belong to you, do we create a new user in our database. Now, if the user is going through the registration process again, or maybe they're just trying to deposit coins to their account, then they're already going to have a user object in here. In that case, we either just need to update their account number or update their balance if they're just depositing coins. So, all right, handle deposit confirmation. Let's go ahead and do it. Now, we can probably steal this code right here because the first thing that we want to do is we just want to update the given deposit that they give us to toggle is confirmed equal to true. So for this deposit, same logic as before, instead of increment, since that adds to a numerical value, we just want to set a value, and that is confirmed equal to true. All right. So whenever a deposit is confirmed, of course, we want to update is confirmed equal to true. Beautiful, beautiful. Now, right after this, remember, we are now to a point where we can essentially process their verified payment. So if I can find this diagram again. All right. So when we do verify that the payment was accepted and added to the blockchain, then we're going to do one of two things. We're going to say, was this user trying to register? And that is why they're sending us this payment. And if so, we just need to essentially process their registration. Now, if not, and we receive the payment, if it doesn't have anything to do with the registration process, This likely just means that it's a user trying to send us coins to update their balance. Now, that is the main flow we're going to go from. So before we check that, we first need to see, is there a registration related to this deposit? And this is actually pretty easy. All we have to do is query the registrations collection and check. So we can say, okay, we're going to try to find a registration, and the registration we're going to find by the matching account number of the sender and the verification code. All right. So come down. Okay. So the account number that we're going to match is for the deposits sender. Okay, simple enough. And the verification code that we're going to look for is for the deposit memo. Now, if there is a matching object, and let me see if I have my registrations pulled up here. Okay. So if we found a registration in our registrations collection and we have a confirmed deposit with this information, then that means that we need to send them through the registration handling process. If not, then we're just gonna update the balance for this user. So we'll say if a registration was found, then let me just put handle registration. I'll put pass for now. Else, then what we are going to do is if we received a verified deposit and it wasn't a registration, then what we can do is we can just update that user's balance. So we are just going to go for the users collection. We're going to do update 1. And then how are we going to find what user we need to update? Well, we can actually just take this right here. We're going to find it by the account number of the sender. And then after this, what do we want to do? We just want to increment their balance. So it's the same logic as here. I'm just a little bit lazy. So instead of incrementing their confirmation checks, we are just going to increment their balance now by 1. No, we actually want to increment it by the amount that they sent. So deposit amount, just like that. All right, so this is looking beautiful, and I believe we only have one more function to cover, and that is handle registration. So what is this? Handle deposit confirmation. So let's put it above here. So we'll say handle registration, and all this is going to do is it is going to take in this registration that we found right here, and we can say, okay. All right, so the first thing that we need to do when handling registrations, popping over my chart, is remember from the very first tutorial where we need to say, first, let's just do another quick check to make sure that this user doesn't already exist. In other words, the account number that we got with this related registration is not already existing in the users collection. Now, aside from that, when we find, okay, this is the more normal flow where they're just trying to go through the registration process and nothing bad happened, then what we need to decide is, do we need to create a new user if this Discord user is trying to register for the first time? Or if there was a user that already existed in our database and they fell through the entire registration process, this means that we just need to update their account number. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to it, and we'll say ensure account number is not already registered, and then we'll say we are either gonna create a new user or update the account number of an existing user. Beautiful. So the first thing I'm going to do in this function is I'm actually going to pull out this right here. So since we already have an existing registration that we passed in, I'm going to pull out the ID from it, because remember, this is actually the Discord's user ID, and I'm just going to rename it to a variable that makes a little bit more sense. And the reason I'm doing that is because not only for clarification for whoever reading the code. But also it's the same ID that we're going to be using for the user object. So since we're just going to be using this value a couple times, I figured I might as well just pluck it out. And then, all right, so handle deposit confirmation, might as well just pass in this deposit right now. Apparently forgot to do that. And okay, where am I? Handle registration, that's what we were looking for. Okay, so in handle registration, I'm gonna say Discord user ID, and that's equal to the registration's unique ID. And then another thing that I want to do is I want to check if this account number was registered already. So I'm actually going to be storing this in a variable as well, even though we probably don't need to. I want to do this because the query is going to look a little bit weird, and I'm afraid anyone reading over this code, if they just say, okay, we're checking for this query, but why are you checking for it? Then it may be a little bit hard. So either way, even though all we are trying to do right here is we're going to say on the users collection, is there a user with this account number already registered? So, okay, going to be super lazy here. We're going to say, is there a user with the account number that already matches the registration account number? And we're going to take this entire result set and wrap it into Boolean. So if it comes back as true, that means that something must have messed up. Well, not messed up. It's an edge case that we accounted for, and it says the account number is already registered, so you can't register it. So in that case, we are just going to run this logic right here where we say, hey, there's an error, you already registered, and we're just going to delete that registration since it has no more purpose. So let me actually just write this logic real quick. Okay. So we'll say if not account number registered, which is the ideal flow that we want to get through. We're going to write this logic in just a bit, but for right now we can write pass. For the time being, we can just write that edge case logic where if we say if the account number is already registered, instead of setting the user up, instead what we're just going to do is delete that registration from our registrations collection. And in order to do that, we can just do this. What registration do you want to delete? The one with the ID equal to this ID. We can either do this, but yeah, since we already have this variable pulled out, we can just say this one. Okay, so that's the edge case, but now let's get to the meat and potatoes of this actual registration logic. So what I'm going to do is I'm about to query the users collection, but first I want to make sure that I store those results as, we'll say, existing user. And we're just going to do users, find one. And who are we trying to find? Well, we are trying to find a user with the ID of the Discord ID, because just a refresh, this is what a user's object is going to look like, with the ID being their Discord ID, their account number being whatever account number they verified and registered, and then a balance. And the next bit of logic is pretty easy because we're just going to say if there is an existing user, then what we need to do is on users, update one, and remember the first bit of info you need to pass in is who are you updating? Well, we're updating this user, the one that exists basically. And then what are you trying to do to them? Well, that sounded kind of weird, but all we are doing is we need to set their account number equal to the new one that they passed in. So set their account number equal to the registration account number. All right. So if there's a user going through the registration process, then if they already exist, then just update their account number. Else, if there is not a user yet, then what we just want to do is add one to the users collection. So users, insert one, and the ID is going to be equal to that same ID, and their account number, this is going to be the same too, is going to be that registration account number. And now the one thing that we do want to specify is that when we first create a user, that they just have 0 balance. Now with this, I believe all of our logic is complete. So now what I want to do is this. I'm gonna run this in a second, but what I want to do first is just clean out all of my tables. So okay, users collection, nothing in there, that's great. I'm gonna drop this registrations collection. Remember, these are gonna be created on the fly as needed if everything is working smooth. So let's test this bad boy from the ground up. Okay, so I kept my users collection in here, just like I'm starting out for the very first time. Gonna refresh. Okay, everything is good to go. Have a clear testing ground. And now let me go ahead and run this. So wait for my bot to be ready. And okay, got an error. This is a great start. All right, so I'm a moron and I accidentally put a comma right here when it should have been a colon. So let's go ahead and actually I should. Okay, let me clean this up and let me remove these again. Okay, so now let me refresh and okay. Now that we got all the bugs out of the way, and actually let me do one more thing, and that is this. I'm gonna look at all those passes I wrote and okay. Okay, so I just had some extra passes, so my IDE wasn't yelling at me before, but now that all our code is cleaned up and hopefully we don't have any more issues, database is fresh for start. Let's go ahead and run this. And fingers crossed. Okay, so it says ready polling blockchain, and then let me pop open Mongo and refresh this. And okay, it looks like we do indeed have some deposits. All right, looking good. Now let me refresh this, check users again, and great. So no users, meaning that, okay, it's now listening for deposits on the blockchain, but of course we didn't register yet. So now let me go through and let's see. Okay, I'm gonna register my account number. So in here, I'm gonna copy my account number and I'm gonna say register this account number, hit enter, and it said registration created. So that's a good first step already. Now back in Mongo, if I refresh, we should now have a registration, and that is for my account number, and the verification code is, I was gonna try to pronounce that, Oyala 5. I think that's how you pronounce it. Okay, so anyways, I'm gonna get a DM, and it's gonna say account registration, yada yada. To complete registration, please send the following transaction. This is my account that I'm gonna be sending it from. This 2 is the bot's account. So let me pop open my account manager and say we're gonna be sending it to the bot's account. And then what is the memo? Oila 5, whatever I said. That's the memo. And you should be receiving 1 coin. So now I'm going to send this. And all right, payment has been sent. Now if we pop open Mongo again, in this registrations, or let's first look at deposits. So I'm gonna refresh deposit. And that's not good. So we had 5 before, but we should be seeing 6. So let's go ahead and look at our API. And yeah, we do have 6 transactions in our API. So what? Okay. Actually, I think I know what the issue is. Okay. So what we were doing, I have a very strong suspicion. Okay. So whenever we were checking for deposits, that what we were doing is we were passing in the ordering, and we were starting with, even though we were saying block created date, that we need to do a minus right here because this is going to do the most recent dates first. I always get confused ascending and descending with dates. What one is most recent and what one is oldest. But anyway, I have a feeling that this is what was happening. So since it was incorrectly starting with the oldest transactions first, once it saw a transaction that already existed and tried to add it as the deposit, then it just broke out a little bit too early and it never got to those new ones. However, with this update, we should be getting in the most recent deposits first. So it should add those is new deposits. So now, and hopefully for the last time, got my bot stopped. Let's go ahead and delete this. All right, see deposits, and also see your registrations. Users all cleared out, refresh. Okay, so fingers crossed. Let's go ahead and run this bad boy one more time and see if it works. So we're gonna run main. Hopefully we don't get any errors right away. Okay, polling the blockchain looks good. So what I'm gonna do now is in Discord, actually let me get my account number. So I'm gonna try to register this account. So in Discord, I'm just gonna hit register this account, registration created. Gonna pop open my Discord bot and it's gonna say send a coin from your account that you're trying to register to the Discord bot account with 1 coin. And I already have the bot account right there. This is the memo that it asked for. It asked for 1 coin. So I'm gonna go ahead and send that. And now in Mongo, we should see another deposit pop up. So, okay, and actually what was that memo? So the memo was F4M, if you guys can't read it on your screen. So in Mongo, okay, very cool. So F4M, looking good. And by this point, I do not have a registration because hopefully it happened so fast that it already converted it to a user. All right, so that is working as expected. My registration was successful, and we probably do want to send them some kind of message back to let them know that everything was successful. They are now a valid user. But for now, let's just test, first of all, the logic of whenever I send more coins to this bot that it just adds my balance. So let me pop open my account manager, and I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna send, let's do 25 coins to the bot. And since all of this is registered, I already have everything hooked up, then I shouldn't need to add anything for the memo or have to re-register again, whatever. And we don't have any status checks or anything built in, but what we can do is just refresh it right there and boom, look at that. So in Mongo, which is kind of the source of truth for the bot, my balance did update. And one last flow that I want to cover is this. What happens when I created this cool new account called Baku and I want to update my account number to be this? Well, in the Discord bot, people are messaging me right now. I just say, I want to register a new account number. So register DB whatever. Okay, so the tutorials bot says, okay, you can do that. That's cool. But you're going to have to send a coin with this memo. So I can say I can do that. So to the bot, I'm just going to send a coin with the most recent memo to update my account number. And when I send this, okay, it got deducted from my account. And now let's see, is there a registration? It doesn't look like it. So if I refresh this, you can, well, I don't even need to refresh it. You see that my balance is the same. However, I now have that brand new account number, DB9, yada, 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 yada. All right, so that was a long little mini series, but I mean, very informative. And now what we got is a nice little TNB Discord payment integration. So you can begin making bots that accept TNB coins. And again, hopefully I try to teach this in a way that the concepts in the core architecture of what we're learning, if you want to plug this into another blockchain, then you can easily do that as well. But yeah, last but not least, actually let me know how you guys like this series. If you prefer shorter videos covering the concepts, or if every now and again you like to break out into a larger project like this. I had a lot of fun and it was pretty interesting. Had a couple bugs at the end, but you know, we got through it. And yeah, just would love your guys' feedback. So let me know what you thought, and thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.